So today, we're taking a dive into a case that has really captured the public imagination. The trial of Karen Reed. As you know, Reed, she's a Mansfield resident, charged with the January 29th, 2022 murder of her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, who was a Boston police officer.
And the core of the prosecution's case really is that Reed struck O'Keefe with her SUV.
Right.
When she dropped him off at a Canton home after they'd been out for the evening.
But then you have the completely different narrative coming from the defense.
Completely.
They're contending that O'Keefe was actually attacked inside that house and, well, that there's a bigger effort to frame Reed for his death.
Yeah.
Now, what's particularly fascinating, I think, about this retrial is the intense spotlight that's been thrown on one figure in particular, Judge Beverly Cannon. She's presiding over the proceedings.
Right.
It's pretty unusual, to see this level of public attention directed right at a judge.
Absolutely. So this isn't just about dissecting the evidence for or against Karen Reed. We're going to be exploring the questions surrounding Judge Cannon herself.
Okay.
That includes, her professional journey, the defense's attempts to get her recused from the case, and some of the controversies that have popped up from her decisions and her conduct in the courtroom.
Yeah, it really highlights how the dynamics inside the courtroom and, the public discussion that gets amplified by social media can almost become another element of the legal process itself.
Yeah, it really can.
Okay, so let's unpack Judge Cannon's background a bit. It seems like she's had a pretty significant career in the Massachusetts legal world.
Oh, she has. Judge Cannon grew up right here in Massachusetts, went to UMass for undergrad, and then got her law degree from New England School of Law.
Okay.
And for really substantial part of her career, a full 24 years, she dedicated herself to public defense work.
Wow.
Yeah, with the Committee for Public Counsel Services. She even became the attorney in charge for their Dedham office. And she got this award back in 2002. The Massachusetts Bar Association's Access to Justice Defender of the Year Award.
So really respected on the defense side.
Definitely. It really speaks to her standing within the defense bar. And it's, kind of a fascinating angle because you might think someone with that deep experience advocating for the accused might have a particular lens, maybe, when looking at prosecution arguments or defense challenges.
Right, maybe a different perspective on due process or
It's
something.
actually, yeah, a more perhaps nuanced understanding.
So a long and distinguished career on that side. How did she make the jump to becoming a judge?
Well, in 2009, she got appointed as a judge in the Quincy District Court. That was by Governor Deval Patrick.
Okay.
Then 5 years later, 2014, Governor Patrick appointed her again, this time to the Norfolk Superior Court.
Which is where the Karen Reed case is being heard.
Exactly. And it's worth noting, too, this isn't the first really high-profile case she's had that ended in a mistrial. Yeah, she also oversaw the trial of Emmanuel Lopes. He was charged with murdering a police officer and an innocent bystander. That also had a mistrial before a guilty verdict was reached in the second trial.
So she does have experience with the whole retrial process.
She does, yeah. The complexities involved.
That's an interesting point. Now, usually judges rotate off cases, right?
Yeah.
It's not typical for a judge to stay on for a retrial.
Generally, no, it's not. In the Superior Court system, the judges usually rotate every 3 months or so.
Right.
But in this specific case, Judge Cannon was specially appointed by the Chief Justice of the trial court to keep jurisdiction over the Reed case.
Now, why was that?
The reasoning was mostly logistical. Since she presided over the first trial, she already has this, deep understanding of the evidence, the witnesses, what happened before.
Makes sense.
The idea is just that this continuity makes the retrial process potentially more efficient. The Chief Justice, who handles the admin side of the courts, made that call.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes practical sense. And I remember seeing something about a retired judge commenting on this.
Yeah, retired Judge Jack Liu. He described Judge Cannon's involvement here as a really significant moment in her career. He even called it, I think, the apex for her life's work so far.
Wow, high praise.
It is, and he specifically pointed to her background, her long time as a respected defense lawyer. He suggested that her deep understanding of that side gives her a unique perspective now, presiding over such a complex and, frankly, intensely watched trial.
Interesting. So there's this recognition within the legal community of maybe the unique pressure she's under.
Seems that way, yeah, given her specific career path.
Okay, so she brings all this experience. But despite that, the defense team did try to get her recused, right? What were their arguments?
They did try. Back in July 2023, defense attorney Alan Jackson formally argued for her recusal.
Okay.
The main reason, he said, was what he called an undeniable erosion of public confidence in her ability to be impartial. He really emphasized the sheer amount of media coverage and all the debate and speculation happening on social media about the case.
So it's interesting, they framed it around public perception, not necessarily saying she couldn't be fair.
Exactly. Jackson made that clear. He said they weren't claiming she couldn't be fair, but more that the intense public scrutiny and all the narratives floating around might make the public doubt her fairness.
Regardless of her actual intentions.
Right. And he also brought up concerns about what he called her routine practice of allegedly not ruling on defense motions quickly enough.
Okay. And then there was that whole anti-Bev message thing that blew up online, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah.
This next part's kind of wild. The defense brought up some really unusual social media stuff. Tell us about that message.
Right, so that became another piece of their recusal argument. Someone claiming to be related to Jennifer McCabe.
Who's Brian Albert's sister-in-law.
All right.
Key figure for the defense theory.
This person supposedly sent a message about Judge Cannon and a seaside cottage to the Turtle Boy blog.
Which has been all over this case.
All over it, yeah. And known for pushing theories that Red was framed. The implication of the message was, some kind of potential, maybe improper connection between the judge and the McCabe family.
How did Judge Cannon respond to that specific claim?
She addressed it head on, flatly rejected any connection. She said she doesn't know Sean McCabe, who is Jennifer McCabe's brother-in-law, never talked to him, never socialized with him or anyone involved, families or witnesses. And she basically dismissed it, saying, untrue and unsubstantiated rumors spread on the internet can force a judge to recuse herself.
Okay. There was also something about a Venmo payment, I think.
That's right. Another point the defense raised was a Venmo payment from 2022 for a beach house rental that apparently mentioned Beverly.
Beverly with an extra E.
Exactly. Judge Cannon pointed that out, the misspelling. Her name's Beverly, Beverly.
Right.
And she also stated, point blank, that she has never rented out her Cape Cod home, ever.
So she used that discrepancy.
Yeah, she used it to argue the recusal motion lacked credibility. Basically saying this piece of info was unreliable, not a real reason for her to step down.
Interesting how these tiny social media details become actual points in court filings.
It really shows you the strange new world of legal battles in the digital age. It's something else.
And ultimately, she denied the motion.
She did. And it seems the defense didn't immediately appeal that denial at the time.
Okay, so Judge Cannon stays on the case, retrial gets going. But it hasn't exactly been smooth sailing in the courtroom, from what we hear.
No, definitely not smooth. There have been, frequent disagreements, clashes, whatever you want to call them, between Reed's lawyers and Judge Cannon.
Okay.
One big point of friction actually goes back to the first trial's jury deliberations.
Ah, right.
Reportedly, the jury was unanimously leaning towards acquittal on second-degree murder and leaving the scene.
But deadlocked on manslaughter.
Exactly, deadlocked on manslaughter. So the defense argued because of those unanimous acquittal votes, those two bigger charges should have been tossed out based on double jeopardy.
Which prevents being tried twice for the same crime after acquittal.
Precisely. Now, they've appealed that double jeopardy argument all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court after losing in the lower courts. So that's a whole separate legal fight happening.
Definitely a significant legal argument.
Yeah.
What about leading up to this second trial? Any notable friction then?
Yes. Before the retrial even started, there was a dust-up about the defense's planned expert witnesses for crash reconstruction.
Oh, yeah.
Judge Cannon actually admonished the defense, said they'd made repeated misrepresentations to the court about these witnesses.
Oof. Did anything come of that?
Well, she didn't end up kicking any lawyers off the case or anything, but it definitely signaled, some real tension there between the defense and the judge.
And a huge point of controversy during the retrial itself seems to be about how the defense can even present their alternative theory.
That's probably the biggest flashpoint right now. Judge Cannon reportedly made a ruling that seriously limits the defense's ability to name alternative suspects.
How so?
Basically, unless they can show what she considers direct, hard evidence that clearly links someone else to the crime.
Wow.
Yeah, so it has a massive impact on their strategy, which, as you know, is all about arguing that people inside the house that night were responsible for O'Keefe's injuries.
So they can't just float names or suggest possibilities.
Not without meeting this higher bar for evidence as defined by her ruling. It makes it much harder for them.
That sounds like a major constraint on putting on their defense. And then there were these reports about Judge Cannon's demeanor, her interactions in court.
Yes, there's been a lot of talk about that. Numerous reports and even some video clips have gone viral.
I've seen some of those.
Yeah, showing Judge Cannon admonishing the defense attorneys, cutting off their arguments, raising her voice. There was one instance where she apparently told a lawyer to just sit down and let me make my ruling. It's definitely fueled a ton of online debate about her courtroom style. Some see it as firm, necessary control. Others see it as maybe aggressive or showing a bias against the defense.
It's just undeniable that this case has exploded way beyond the courtroom walls. It's become this huge public spectacle.
Absolutely. National attention, retrial underway, public interest is still incredibly high.
Yeah.
You've got constant news coverage everywhere, and social media is just, overflowing with discussions, theories, arguments. It's in that environment that the Auntie Bev nickname for Judge Kane really took off.
And those viral clips from the courtroom, especially the ones with her and the defense lawyers, they just seem to pour gasoline on that online fire, right?
Yeah.
Fueling more speculation.
They really do. People share them, pick them apart, leading to endless commentary online about her fairness, whether her actions hint at bias. It's like every single word, every gesture in court is being scrutinized by this massive online audience.
It's interesting, too, even the prosecution trying to control the out-of-court narrative faced pushback.
That's right. The prosecution wanted a court order to stop the defense talking publicly about certain things.
A gag order, basically.
Sort of, yeah. But defense attorney David Yannetti pushed back hard. He argued, hey, the prosecution was fine with media coverage when it seemed to help their story. And he argued that gagging the defense wouldn't actually stop the public talking. It might just make it worse, make it seem like information was being hidden.
So if we look at it from the defense's viewpoint, what's their general feeling about how things are going in court? Sounds like they feel pretty boxed in.
The defense definitely seems to feel they're hitting major roadblocks. They've expressed feeling shut down, not just by the prosecution, but by Judge Cannon's rulings and how she's running things.
Okay.
You can sense this real frustration about not being able to fully lay out their theory involving the other people in the house that night.
Right.
And they largely blame that on the judge's restrictions, not being able to name suspects, difficulty getting certain evidence admitted that they think supports their case.
And it's not just about naming names, right? It affects how they question witnesses, too.
No, precisely. They voiced frustration when their questioning gets cut off, especially when they're trying to dig into the credibility of the investigators or highlight what they see as problems or inconsistencies in the prosecution's forensic evidence. There's this distinct feeling you get from the defense team that they're not just arguing against the prosecution's case, but that they're, as they've put it, kind of fighting the system itself, battling limitations from both sides, the prosecution and the judge.
This whole situation, it really brings up some bigger questions, doesn't it? Like, how might Judge Cannon's rulings actually affect how the jury sees the whole thing?
That's a critical point. Every ruling a judge makes, even seemingly small ones, can subtly shape the story the jury hears and how they weigh the evidence.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if the defense is really hampered in presenting a full alternative theory, the jury might naturally end up focusing more on the prosecution's version just because it's the narrative they hear presented most completely.
And what about all this public pressure, this intense scrutiny? Can a judge really stay totally neutral and unaffected by that?
It's got to be incredibly difficult, a very fine line to walk. This level of public attention adds a layer of complexity that's, well, pretty rare, even for big trials.
Sure.
Judges are obviously expected to be impartial, rule only on the law and the evidence in front of them, but the constant public gaze, the commentary, even personal attacks online, it creates an environment where maintaining that neutrality, both in fact and just in how it looks to the public, becomes a huge challenge.
It also really throws into sharp relief that tension, doesn't it? Between the judge needing to keep order and control the trial, and the defense needing the space to mount a really strong, thorough defense.
Exactly. The judge has to run the proceedings fairly efficiently, keep out irrelevant stuff that could prejudice the jury. But there's this super delicate balance. You have to make sure the defense still gets a fair shot to explore all reasonable avenues, present their case fully. And this case is also just a really stark example of how theories born and spread on social media can actually bleed into and influence real-world court cases here in Massachusetts.
So just to kind of wrap it up, we've got this judge, Judge Cannon, with a long background as a public defender. Now she's overseeing this incredibly divisive, murder retrial.
Yeah.
Her history, the defense trying to get her removed, her rulings, her courtroom style, it's all become this huge focus of debate and controversy.
Right, and all of it amplified by just massive public and media attention on the Karen Reed case.
It's just a really tangled situation. You've got the basic need for a fair trial bumping up against this intense public fascination and these defense claims of bias and feeling restricted.
Exactly. It's incredibly complex.
And that leaves us with this, maybe, for you to think about. In these really high-profile cases, where the public and the media gets constantly involved, how does that change the traditional role of the judge? What kind of impact does all that external pressure have on actually finding justice, and maybe just as importantly, on the public's trust in the whole legal system? It forces you to think about that balance, judicial authority, courtroom rules, and the defendant's basic right to a strong defense.
It really does.
Definitely something to keep pondering as the Karen Reed trial moves forward and as you follow the news and hear all the different viewpoints out there.